The first thing Mark noticed was the mirror. It stood in the hallway of the old townhouse like it had been waiting for him, tall, framed in tarnished silver, the glass cloudy with faint streaks that looked like old breath. He hadn't seen it when the realtor had shown him the place a week earlier, but now, with the moving truck gone and the house echoing with silence, it seemed impossible to ignore. The mirror leaned against the wall across from the front door, angled slightly, as though it wanted him to look into it every time he came or went. Mark caught his reflection as he set the last box on the floor. He expected to see the usual, his tired face, the unshaven jaw, the dark circles under his eyes that never seemed to leave since Claire had. No. He shook his head, unwilling to go there yet. But the reflection seemed wrong. Just slightly. His movements matched, but the eyes, they looked a fraction too dark, too hollow. And when he turned away, he thought. Though he told himself it was just exhaustion, that the reflection lingered for half a second longer than it should have. He laughed under his breath, shaking it off. New house jitters, that was all. The townhouse smelled faintly of dust and old wood. He told himself he liked that it felt authentic. Still, as the evening bled into night, the quiet grew heavier. The street outside was hushed, even the traffic from the main road felt muted, as though the house swallowed sound. By midnight, Mark had unpacked enough to make a bed on the mattress upstairs. The mirror downstairs nagged at him, though. Every time he walked past it, he glanced, just a quick flick of the eyes, and every time, it seemed different. Sometimes brighter, sometimes darker, sometimes almost like the glass pulsed faintly with its own rhythm. He poured himself a whiskey, trying to drown the unease. At 3 a.m, he woke to a sound. A whisper. At first, he thought it was the wind through the old window panes. But then it grew clearer, sliding under the bedroom door, climbing the stairs like a breath. Mark. His name. He sat up, heart hammering. He told himself he was dreaming, but the voice came again, low, drawn out. Mark. The sound came from downstairs. From the hallway. From the mirror. Mark didn't sleep the rest of that night. He sat on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands, trying to convince himself it was a dream, some half-awake hallucination born from exhaustion and whiskey. But every time the floor creaked downstairs or the pipes groaned in the walls, his chest tightened. He imagined the whisper threading its way back up the staircase, curling around the bedroom door, calling his name again. By morning, pale light leaked through the blinds, turning the shadows a dull gray. That's when Mark finally forced himself back downstairs. The mirror stood exactly where it had the night before, tall and silent, glass dull with streaks. He approached it cautiously, like a man approaching an animal that might suddenly bite. His reflection stared back, the same stubble, the same bloodshot eyes, the same tired slump of his shoulders. Normal. He leaned closer. Pressed his palm against the cool glass. For a second, he thought, swore, the glass beneath his hand pulsed, like the faintest beat of a heart. He jerked his hand back, stumbling a step away. The mirror remained motionless, blank. The move. The townhouse wasn't supposed to be haunted. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Mark had signed the lease 2 weeks ago, after months of searching. He told people he wanted a quieter neighborhood, somewhere away from the constant noise of the city. The truth was uglier, he wanted to disappear. Ever since Claire's accident, he'd been unraveling. At first, friends checked in. They brought food, dragged him out for drinks, called late at night to make sure he wasn't alone. But grief, he learned, had an expiration date for everyone except the one drowning in it. After a while, the calls stopped. People avoided him. He avoided them back. The townhouse had been cheap, too cheap for its location. The realtor mentioned it had sat empty for years. That should have been a red flag. But Mark didn't care. It was space, walls, silence. The mirror, though, he still didn't understand. When he signed the lease, the rooms had been bare. Now here it was, planted like some forgotten relic. Maybe the last tenant left it behind. Maybe the landlord thought it added character. The first visit. That afternoon, his sister Emma stopped by. She hadn't seen the place yet, and Mark had barely answered her texts in weeks. "God, it's gloomy," she said as soon as she stepped inside. Her voice echoed in the bare hallway, bouncing off the hardwood. "You sure this is the fresh start you wanted?" Mark shrugged. "It's cheap." Emma was younger by 3 years but always seemed older, steadier. She gave him a look, the kind that carried years of unspoken worry. Her eyes caught on the mirror. "Where'd you get that?" she asked, stepping closer. "It came with the place," Mark muttered. Emma tilted her head, frowning slightly. "That's weird. It doesn't look like it belongs here." "Yeah, well, neither do I." She shot him another look, but didn't push. Strain between them. They ate takeout in the kitchen. The conversation was stilted, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Emma set down her chopsticks and leaned forward. "Mark, you can't just lock yourself away like this." Claire wouldn't. "Don't." His voice snapped sharper than he intended. Emma froze, lips pressed together. Mark rubbed his eyes. "I'm sorry. I don't want to talk about her." "Mark, it's been a year. You can't keep living like you're the one who—" "Enough," he said, standing abruptly. His chair scraped the floor. The silence that followed felt like a punishment. Emma eventually gathered her things, leaving him with a hug he didn't return. When the door shut, the townhouse seemed even quieter than before. The watching glass. That night, as he passed the hallway, Mark caught the mirror again. His reflection looked back, but something in it was softer. Gentler. Not the haggard version of himself he expected. The face in the mirror looked more alive, more at peace. He leaned in, squinting. His reflection seemed to smile, just faintly, even though his own lips hadn't moved. Mark stumbled back, pulse hammering. His rational mind scrambled for answers. Sleep deprivation, stress, too much alcohol. But another thought wormed its way in. What if it isn't me? The phone call. At 2 a.m., his phone rang. The sound shattered the silence, sending his nerves spiking. He fumbled to answer. "Hello?" No one replied. Just static. "Emma?" The static shifted. Then, faintly, a voice. "Mark." His blood ran cold. The line went dead. He stood there in the dark, phone trembling in his hand, staring down the hallway. The mirror seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, waiting. The next few days blurred together in unease. Every morning, Mark woke up convinced he'd dreamed it all. But by nightfall, the house reminded him. Shadows lengthened, the air thickened, and the mirror became impossible to ignore. At first, the changes were small. His reflection blinked a fraction slower than he did. It smiled faintly when his own face remained slack. Sometimes it tilted its head just a little too late, as if studying him rather than mimicking him. He stopped turning the hallway lights off. By the fourth night, he began hearing whispers again. Not always his name. Sometimes just a hiss, a murmur like words spoken through water. "Mark. Stay. Look." The voices threaded through the air like cobwebs, clinging to him no matter how hard he tried to shake them. A visit from the landlord. On the 5th day, Mark called his landlord, claiming he wanted repairs. He didn't mention the mirror, not directly, but hoped the man would notice and explain its presence. The landlord arrived in the afternoon, heavy-set and sweating. He inspected the pipes, grunted about the radiators, and ignored the mirror completely. Finally, Mark asked, "That mirror, was it here when the place was listed?" The landlord glanced at it briefly, eyes narrowing. Oh. Yeah. Must have been left behind. By who? Previous tenant. Who was that? The landlord shrugged. Don't remember. Place has been empty for a while. But Mark saw the man's eyes flick toward the mirror again, just briefly, as if afraid of looking too long. When he left, Mark felt more unsettled than before. Emma returns. Emma came back the next weekend, bringing groceries. You look worse, she said flatly as she unpacked the bags. Are you even eating? I'm fine, Mark lied. Her gaze drifted again to the mirror. That thing gives me the creeps. You should cover it. Mark stiffened. It's just a mirror. Emma raised a brow. Then why do you keep looking at it? He had no answer. That night, after she left, he tried to do as she suggested. He fetched an old bedsheet and draped it over the glass. For the first time in days, he felt some relief. The hallway looked normal again, almost cozy. But at 3 a.m, he woke to a crash. He stumbled downstairs, heart pounding. The sheet lay crumpled on the floor. The mirror stood uncovered. His reflection smiled at him. The journal. On the 7th day, Mark found something wedged behind a radiator in the bedroom upstairs, a small, leather-bound journal. The handwriting inside was jagged, frantic. Day 12. The whispers are louder. They know my name. Day 15. It's not me in the mirror anymore. It's her. Day 20. She wants me to stay. She says I don't deserve to leave. The entries grew more erratic, words scratched out, sentences breaking apart. The final page read. Dawn is the only time I see the truth. But by then, it's too late. Mark dropped the journal, his skin crawling. Nightmares. That night, Mark dreamed of Claire. She stood in the hallway, pale and smiling, her reflection behind the glass. But when he reached for her, the glass cracked, splintering lines racing across her face until it split open, revealing a darkness so deep it pulled him in. He woke screaming, drenched in sweat. From downstairs came the sound of glass rattling, as though the mirror itself was laughing. Mark's breaking point came on the 10th night. The whispers didn't stop anymore. They swelled and ebbed like the tide, constant, suffocating. Sometimes they sounded like Claire. Sometimes like Emma. Sometimes like his own voice, begging. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. His hands shook constantly. His face in the bathroom mirror looked gaunt, sickly. But the hallway mirror. That reflection looked perfect. Healthy. Rested. Smiling faintly. And every time Mark moved, the reflection lagged, just slightly, like it was resisting letting go. At midnight, he snapped. He grabbed a hammer from his toolbox and stormed downstairs. You want me? He shouted at the mirror. You think I'm afraid of you? The whispers rose, frantic, overlapping voices like a chorus of drowning souls. Mark swung the hammer. The glass cracked, but didn't break. Instead, his reflection flickered. For a split second, he saw Claire in the glass, her hair damp, her eyes full of water, her lips moving soundlessly. Claire, he whispered. His chest ached. She pressed her palm against the inside of the glass. He pressed his own against it, sobbing. The mirror pulsed. And then, without warning, his reflection moved first. It smiled wider, eyes black as ink, and yanked him forward. Mark screamed as the glass shattered around him. But instead of falling through, he found himself staring at the hallway, from the other side. The mirror was whole again. His reflection, his other self, stood in the hallway, alive and free, while Mark pounded desperately from behind the glass. No one heard him. When Emma returned the next morning, the house was silent. The groceries she brought days earlier still sat on the counter, half-rotten. The air smelled faintly of dust and mildew. She called his name, checked upstairs, and finally came to the hallway. There was the mirror. Her brother stood in it, smiling faintly. His skin looked healthier, his eyes brighter, his posture straighter than she'd seen in months. "Mark," she whispered, stepping closer. The reflection raised a hand and waved. Emma frowned, tilting her head. Something in the smile felt wrong. Too sharp. She leaned closer to the glass. And for a fraction of a second, she thought she saw something else, another Mark, behind the glass, screaming silently, his fists pounding against the barrier. She stumbled back, heart racing. The reflection smiled wider. Emma turned and fled, but the memory of that smile followed her out the door, clinging to her like a shadow. That night, long after she'd locked herself in her apartment, she dreamed of the townhouse. Of the mirror. Of Mark smiling at her, whispering her name from the other side of the glass. When she woke, her phone buzzed. One new voicemail. Static. Then a whisper. "Emma."